Good morning, good evening, whatever time you're listening. Welcome to episode 10 of The Practical People, and this is a emergency episode of The Practical People. We have a very important event that just occurred. The royal baby has been born. No, just kidding. Steve Johnson is here, and he has a Kickstarter for volume 2 of his book, Rubberhead. And we need to get the word out because this is, for reasons that I'm going to elaborate during this interview, a very important book, not only to special effects artists, but to the next generation of filmmakers. I'm hoping to get into reasons why with Steve, but why not ask the man himself? Steve, thank you for coming to the show. How are you doing today?
I've been better, actually. Thank you for having me. It's been a wild ride. These Kickstarter things, my God in heaven, they're like a 30-day roulette wheel. You know, you put all your money on red or black in it. In Vegas, it takes about 30 seconds for the ball to hit. But this is a 30-day roulette wheel. Is it going to succeed? Is it going to fail? It's all or nothing with Kickstarter, so it's stressful.
And I think it's more like, it's not just a roulette wheel, but I mean, you worked on Lord of Illusions, and I'm reminded of the wheel that the magician was on. It was a swan, where the knives are falling down. I mean, it's.
Right.
I've been through them,
That's
and
what this feels like.
it's coming at you, man. And you were at. I'm going to cover our current event, which is Monsterpalooza. Just took place, and you were there with Volume One of Rubberhead.
Correct.
What is that experience like for you? I've this is only my second Monsterpalooza. I've done other monster collections conventions, but this one seems to be one of the best. I mean, it has the biggest collection of name talents, and it's the one that everyone shows up for. You've done Monsterpalooza before, right?
Oh yeah, many, many, many times. It is the biggest, and it is the best. Unfortunately, now that I've got a book to pimp, I'm kind of they have to put me in a straitjacket and chain me to the table because I have to. Every time I leave the table, I miss out on sales. So because people want to talk to me, and they want to get the book signed. So it's kind of sucky for me because I can't run around like a rabid hyena and see all the amazing creations and talk to all my friends. So, but I'm there to sell books, and that's my crowd, that's my people, and that's what it's become for me, and it'll probably be that way for the rest of my life because we've got a long Rubberhead journey ahead of us. There's 4 more volumes coming,
Yeah, that's right.
and
Now,
I couldn't believe it. The book's been out for a year and a half, and I sold out. I sold out of every case of books that I bought. People are still clamoring for it.
and people can get copies of it through your Kickstarter, if I'm correct. They can. There is a.
We're gonna run out. Yeah, there's a couple of ways. If you're in America, you can order on Amazon, Volume One. I've got still a stock on Amazon. You can also order it on my website, stevejohnsoneffect.com. There's a bundle, I believe, on the new Kickstarter for Volume Two, where you can also pick up Volume One. But we're definitely going to run out. I'm going to London next month and to IMAX, International Makeup Artist Trade Show, and they ordered a bunch of books. So I'm looking at my stack of cases right now, and it is dwindling fast. And what people need to know is after this print run is gone, it's gone forever. So I think that kind of makes them very highly collectible because we did a run of 2,000. We did 1,000 hardcovers, 1,000 soft covers, and when they're gone, they're gone. And, they're going to be worth more money, particularly after I die, and that's coming up next Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Ah, well, that's one way to get out of your pledge reward obligations. But no, I want to talk a bit more about this book because originally, and again, like I said in my intro, I think this is a very important book, not just for fans of the movies you've worked on or for aspiring effects artists, but for filmmakers in general. And this.
Well, not just filmmakers, for artists, for teachers, I wrote it, I kind of patterned the take after a couple of my favorite authors, Anthony Bourdain, Anthony Bourdain, Kitchen Confidential guy.
I don't actually.
Well, you should know him. He's a renegade chef, and he was a heroin and coke addict working in a basement in New York in a kitchen, and as just a line chef or a line cook. And he started writing about the nuts and bolts, the absolute stinking guts of the restaurant industry while he was doing the slave labor. and he became an international superstar. He's got several television shows and several books now, and he's cleaned up his act, and I kind of thought, wow, I should do that with the makeup effects industry. So when I wrote this, in all 5 volumes, I wrote them all at once. They're done. I split them into 5 volumes because it's a 1,000-page novel. So when you throw photos in there, that gives you about 200 pages of narrative per volume. But I wrote it not just for the 10,000 or 20,000 makeup effects fans that would be interested in reading it. I wrote it for soccer moms in New Jersey. I wrote it for attorneys in Tennessee. I wrote it so that it would appeal to a very, very wide audience. So that's my hope, and that's my goal.
Well, I think the great thing about it is you wrote it as a memoir originally. I think you stated
Right.
that there was about 1,000 pages to this, and then you got told, this can't sell this way. You've got to add pictures. You've got to, make it into something visual. But what's really interesting to me about it is, I'm a firm believer you can't separate the art from the lifestyle. That they go hand in hand. You can't work in a vacuum, and the situations, and I think every artist who works and is, really takes it seriously begins to understand that the art is a product of living life and engaging the material and engaging the other talented people and not so talented people involved. You have to think on your feet. It's not like you're just sitting there and these genius ideas are coming to you. This is problem solving.
No, what it's like, I'm glad you mentioned that. All art comes from the well that exists deep inside of all of us. And if your well is dry, you're not going to be able to create anything. So you have to go out in the world and fill your well. You have to take hikes, enjoy nature. You have to listen to music. You have to read. You have to watch movies. You have to have adventures. You have to travel. You have to fill your well. So when you go there to create and you dip that bucket in, it's overflowing.
And, I'm blocking, I think maybe it was Tom Woodruff Jr. who also said there are a lot of people that want to hold back their creativity. Like they've got some good ideas, but they're saving that for themselves, and they'll, just do the work until they get a chance to do their other ideas. But he kind of said, no, that's bull. You have to, dive in every time. That well will replenish if you, I think you have to. I think his point was you have to give as much as you get back.
Right. Well, it's oh God, I lost my train of thought. I just had something very profound to say, and I completely forgot. God damn it! Why are you intriguing me so much? Because instead of coming up with great answers, I'm listening to you.
Well, this is I want to kind of talk a little bit about. Practical effects is obviously, the theme of this show, and it seems to be very important to you. And I'm not an anti-CGI person by any means. I don't want to give, I know a lot of CGI artists who are brilliant artists. But my father-in-law was one of the people you had to audition through if you wanted to get into the Magic Castle, where magicians and illusionists performed.
Right.
Very prestigious. And I used to love going because there's an authenticity to actually experiencing it live. If it's on television or if it's in a movie, there's all sorts of editing and camera tricks that can be used. And CGI is kind of the same way. You can do anything, but there's an authenticity to doing it there on set or there in front of people.
There is, and I love the Magic Castle. It's the coolest club on the planet. And magicians and special effects practical artists are very, very, very similar. I compare often creating a practical effect to pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Because when you go to a place like the Magic Castle and you see a magician pull a rabbit out of his hat, you know he didn't really pull that rabbit out of his hat, but he involved you. He tricked you, so you feel connected. Practical effects are the same way. When you sit in the movie theater and you see something that a group of people had to get together and trick you, it involves you. It connects you to the scene, like watching a magician pull a rabbit out of the hat. But when you watch a digital effect, there's a disconnect there. because there's no connection, because you know it's a bunch of guys sitting in a dark room pushing buttons, and it's a series of zeros and ones. And again, I'm not against digital technology either, but if you look at a movie like the original Jaws, Steven Spielberg, at the end, that sunset is really setting, and that boat is really sinking, and they were racing the clock, and those actors had to do their thing, and the director and the cinematographer and everybody else, and they tricked us into thinking that was really happening. But if Spielberg made that film today, are you kidding me? You'd do it probably 99%, if not 100% digitally, and that disconnects the audience.
His new movie Ready Player One was just dropped all pretense of being anything but digital.
Well, exactly. But again, as a director, who wouldn't want to control every pixel? I mean, it does. I mean, look at Moana. Look at any fully digital film. They're beautiful to look at, and the director has complete autonomy and control. And that's a cool thing too. I mean, the world's changing.
Now, I want to talk a bit about that, because I, on a personal note, I'm a filmmaker. I'm actually just finishing up a feature film that I directed in Texas, which I know is where you're originally from.
Right.
And it was a $15,000 budget. I didn't have money. I wanted a lot of effects, a lot of creatures, that sort of thing, but I didn't have the money to sculpt or run foam or anything like that. I had to get very creative, but I feel that that process allowed me to make a more creative, entertaining, and interesting film to watch than if I would have had all the materials at my disposal. And I
couldn't agree with you more. It's when you have nothing but money to throw at a problem, you get lazy. And when you don't have a lot of money, you become a great problem solver. And a lot of times that it just inspires creativity. And you end up with a better product.
Yeah, and I think, finding your way around those problems, I feel, and I don't know if it's on a visceral level or if it just keeps making you continually think more and more about your story. But, solving those problems, it translates to the audience. It makes it more interesting for the audience as well. And I feel like there are a lot of new directors. Obviously, there are a lot of great new directors, but a lot of new directors who don't take the time to understand the effects. They don't take the time. My favorite example is James Cameron figuring out how to make the face hugger run across the floor at Sigourney Weaver. That was very creative thinking, and it was completely believable, and nobody stopped for a moment to, I mean, I wondered how it was done when I saw it, but, a lot of people were just caught up in the moment. And I think these days, if it was just a CGI face hugger, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting. But do directors, do they need to know this stuff as well? Do they need to understand this? Do you think it helps them become better filmmakers, better storytellers?
I don't, actually, because I have worked with James Cameron on The Abyss, and I've certainly worked with Guillermo del Toro on Blade 2 and Tim Burton on a couple of things. And all of those guys have quite a bit of knowledge about practical effects and also digital effects, but sometimes a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. Sometimes they think they know more than they do, and you end up with too many cooks in the kitchen. And that absolutely happened with James Cameron and Guillermo as well. James, I have to say, though, made me do my best work ever, because he's the biggest taskmaster since the Marquis de Sade. And he, when push came to shove, he came down and got down, rolled up his sleeves, and helped us figure out how to do those NTIs. And that's why they're in that film. Also, there was no digital fallback at that point, so if those NTIs didn't work, there would have been no movie. So talk about pressure. But and then with Guillermo on Blade 2, digital technology was still a little bit in its infancy, and the digital department, Fieldhovet's digital company, did digital effects on that film, and they were making it up as they went along and trying to convince Guillermo they could do the face splitting gags digitally, and we were trying to convince Guillermo, no, it'll never work. We have to do them practically, and in the end, they both worked, and they're both in the movie, and it's great. But it's kind of sad now that things have got to the point they are, because now the younger filmmakers just automatically think digital is always the way to go. And I think Tom and Alec Gillis, your buddies over there at AEI, have said the greatest quote ever. They just hit the nail on the head. And the quote is this: if how's the quote go? And if all you have is a hammer,
every problem looks like a nail.
That's exactly right. That's it. Yeah. So the younger generation of filmmakers sometimes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there does seem to be a huge nostalgia now for handmade creations, and we're seeing it more and more. But I don't know. This conversation could go on forever. And the battle between the digital effects versus practical effects. I mean, is one right? Is one wrong? Are they both right? Are they both wrong? Who knows?
Well, I mean, if this conversation wasn't going on forever, I wouldn't have a show. This is, the great, and this
well,
is.
I will tell you this: we all know that the future of entertainment is 100% digital. We all know that. I mean, we're fighting and clawing, bleeding, and still trying to get our art out there. But the art really is coming out in other ways, not like shows. At shows like Monsterpalooza. I mean, there's more people spending more time, more attention, and making better work now than ever before. And they're doing it not necessarily because producers and directors are shoving money at them to film it, create it, film it, put it on screen. They're doing it because they love it, because this is an amazing art form. So, but that doesn't matter. I mean, have you tried Oculus? I mean, I won't do it because once I put those goggles on, I'll never take them off. You know what I mean?
And people,
that is the future of entertainment: fully immersive digital worlds in which you can move around, not discern the difference between reality and the digital world, and feel, taste, touch, smell, become an angel, become an eagle, become a dinosaur, become a man, a woman, anything. That's the future of entertainment. I guarantee you. I mean, looking at a small screen in a movie theater or at your house, whether it's 60 inches or not, is going to, in 20 years, look like the way we now look at Edison's kinetoscope, the little flickery thing from 120 years ago. I mean, people go, wow, people really actually looked at rectangles? They just looked at rectangles for entertainment? How fucking ridiculous. Because we will be living our entertainment very, very soon now. So you can't, I mean, it's progress.
It's very interesting.
There's a lot of people, Elon Musk being one of them, and I tend to believe it as well, that we're already living in a digital simulation. We just don't know it.
Yeah, I've heard that theory, and it's a fun theory to play around with as well.
How would you know?
It's interesting to me because what you're saying is there's a phrase: the medium is the message, and I believe the person who coined it, who's I can't remember his name at the moment. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Even in the early 80s, he talked about virtual reality or that sort of entertainment coming to be. And yet we're still, Netflix is popular. People still, they still like to look at the frame as, and directors do as well. They like to frame up their shot as an artist would framing up a painting. So it's very possible what you're saying, but at the same time, I still kind of wonder, we still have, digital has obviously changed the way that filmmakers engage film. There are a lot more filmmakers now because anyone can, pick up their cell phone, and people are making cell phone movies and submitting them to film festivals, that's changed things as well. And I think that's probably an avenue where a lot of practical effects can still exist because those filmmakers can't afford the big digital technology or maybe, do want to have something on set. And I was talking to another effects artist. I don't know if they want me to name them or not, but they mentioned that, they've got this big effects shop, and a lot of times they'll do a quote on something, and then, but they also teach. They hold effects classes in their shop in downtime, and then when they do a quote on a project, those filmmakers will take that quote and those designs and show them to their students, and their students will do them for half the money. So,
oh my God, I know. I've often said that education is where it's at right now. There are so many people trying to learn makeup effects, even though, as we're discussing, it seems to be a dwindling art form. But it's not dwindling in the world of education. There's schools all over the world right now, and I want to open my own school. And what I'm going to specifically teach is how to be a teacher at an effects school. huge need for that.
Well, this,
much more so than the actual effects themselves.
I'm taking advantage of the fact that there are a lot of people that want to learn. I'm doing, this show and tutorials on my YouTube channel, and I'm starting to do tutorials on how to shoot on the cheap. And I know that I
teach a lot. I'm going to Leicester actually with a gentleman named Torrance Hanner, and then right after I do IMAX next month, and I'm teaching 2 classes there. I've been to Ireland 4 times in the past couple years teaching classes, and at first I thought, man, I feel guilty doing. I taught a couple semesters at Tom Savini's school in Pittsburgh, but at first I felt really guilty, going, oh man, I'm taking these kids' money and the business is dwindling. Why am I doing this? How do I come to terms with this? And I finally realized that, a lot of these students don't think they're going to be the next Rick Baker, the next Rob Bottin, or Dick Smith, because those days are over. We all know that.
I think.
However, what you're doing when you teach these classes is you're teaching sculpture, and you're teaching painting, you're teaching mold making, you're teaching art. So I look at them as art classes, and who doesn't want to learn art? Because there's a lot of different avenues that you could use those skills in, and so I think the whole education thing is actually a good thing.
Oh, definitely. And
take a look at the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. My God.
Well,
That's
you taught
amazing.
classes for that as well. My favorite being the with Bill Bryan, the plastic bag monster.
Garbage bag monsters, right?
Yeah, and I have to tell. I mean, that's the kind of thing. I like being a low budget director. I mean, but believe me, if someone showed up with a check for $1 million and said this is for you to direct the next Star Wars movie, I'd be there. But I'm not aspiring to direct the next Star Wars movie. I like that I made a movie in my house and in my garage. I was able to use, a lot of my creatures are made out of packing tape. A lot of my tentacle mechanisms are made out of springs and foam core. I pulled the springs out of soap pump bottles. And I really enjoyed that. And I wanted to learn effects because I watched, as a teenager, I would watch behind the scenes stuff, and I would want to tell stories, and I'd go, oh, that's how they do that? I can have a creature in my movie like that if I learn how to do that. Not I want to make creatures, I want to tell stories. But I also,
Right.
I wanted to figure out, my favorite example, I think actually one of my epiphanies was watching a show on MTV called This Is Horror. And you were on there with your Freddy Krueger from Dream Master. And what blew my mind was that in film and effects, scale is not an issue. You can use scale to your advantage. And you created the effect of the souls escaping out of Freddy Krueger.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like you can't tell if an actor's 4 feet tall or 8 feet tall. It's all about how the camera
or turning
approaches.
the camera, or there's so many effects that I think, and you've gotten to work with so many great people, and ultimately I think you've been their problem solver. I mean, if you're working on Species with an H.R.Giger design, you're the one who's figuring out how it works. And Bill Bryan told me a story about Dr. Octopus where you actually came up with a solution for shoving one of the doctors with a tentacle on his throat up through a ceiling panel. And when they found out how you did it, they didn't want to use that effect. Why do you think that sort of thing happens?
Well, actually, first of all, I don't remember that effect.
He said that there was when they're operating on Dr. Octopus, trying to get the tentacles off of him, and Dr. Octopus grabs the doctor by the throat and shoves him through the ceiling. He said, you guys took the camera, turned it on its side, and just slid the guy into a panel sideways.
Oh, right. I love stuff like that. We've done so many things. When Natasha Henstridge comes out of the cocoon in Species 1, the camera was upside down. I love doing that. It's a really, really cool trick.
Oh, wow.
Because it just throws the audience. I like shooting underwater. I like doing every trick in the book that kind of just makes your brain not process the way, because we're normally dealing with gravity. We're normally dealing with everything the way we perceive reality. So if you turn the camera, or if you shoot something underwater and do it dry for wet, it just blows your mind because you're not used to proceeding that way. And it's a free trick.
I want to now. This is something I have a love of underwater puppetry, and you've have on your YouTube channel as Ever Lovin'.
Right.
And I was also told by Alec Gillis, but I haven't been able to find it, that you did another underwater puppet experiment. And I forgot what it was called, but he keeps insisting. He's like, "You love underwater puppets."
I do underwater as often as I can. I built $100,000 tanks so we can just experiment and shoot. Here, we did a lot of underwater stuff there. The movement is free. If you have a big eel, you put a rod on it, and erase the rod digitally. We made jellyfish, and again, shooting them underwater. Unbelievable movement that you basically get for free. I think what you're referring to, what Alec must be speaking about, is a Gene Kuntz movie starring Ben Affleck and a bunch of great stars in that movie. It's called Phantoms. And at the very end of the movie, this ancient evil breaks up through the concrete of this deserted city, and it grows 3 heads and tentacles and starts to rampage. And it was unbelievable. Again, a Billy Bryan thing, custom tank, such a cool creature. And this was back when digital was starting to really fight against practical. And we did it. We shot it. It worked great. It was shot underwater and then composited dry. It was a miniature, but when I say miniature, it was about 7 feet tall. But it was meant to be like 100 feet tall. And it worked great. And they replaced it with a digital abomination in the movie because the digital people convinced them that they could do it better, and they didn't. And it's one of those lost pieces of art that really hurts.
Well, that's, I know that Alec and Tom can relate to that with their work on The Thing, 2011. Yeah. And this is the shame of it, because that happens. The VFX company has the kind of the advantage of kind of grabbing for that extra bit of work, looking at something going, we can make that better. And even if they don't, it's paid for already. And, a lot of producers.
Right, and it's the catchphrase. I mean, particularly back then. I don't remember when we did that. It must have been around 1999 or so. But the catchphrase was, digital. We'll do it digitally. It's all the rage back then. And then the producers, directors didn't know. They heard the word digital, and their hair stood up on end and said, "Yes, we'll do it digitally."
It was kind. After Jurassic Park, it got sexy very quickly, but at the same time, there was still a lot of practical effects. And, once the PR behind CGI hit, people were seeing some great practical effects and going like, isn't it amazing what they can do with computers these days? It's like,
well, I'll tell you right now, that's when my taste for the industry went completely sour, because the reason I got into this business, and not the long hours, not the insanity, not the problem solving, not the camaraderie, not the creation, but the real reason for me was to sit in that darkened theater after months of work and watch an audience gasp in awe at what I had created. I tricked them. Again, that magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. That was the most amazing part of the business, and that's exactly what happened. At some point, I would go to the theater to see my work, and I'd pulled off these amazing practical effects, and everybody just walked out saying, "God damn, those digital effects are great." So it just ruined it for me, because even if I did manage to pull something off that was amazing, people didn't think it was real anyway. They just thought it was digital. So I'm like, fuck this. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going to fall in love with a hooker and live in a treehouse with monkeys.
Yeah, it's something that's a bit disheartening. And, again, the reason that I do this show, it's like convincing people, hey, the camera's been invented, but these oil paintings are still beautiful. Look at these watercolors. Look at what the artist does with these textures. And now as well, there's that phrase of the best effect is what the audience doesn't notice. And I look at, there's still a desire for stop motion animation movies. We're seeing, Isle of Dogs at the moment. People are thrilled about that. And, so I'm beginning to think that, maybe there's bringing a little bit more of the flair that only a certain medium can bring to it, that maybe we can excite audiences with that. I mean, even with Alec doing Harbinger Down, his point was like, this a stop motion film, and maybe we'll have a practical effects film. Maybe, maybe we just need collectively a bit better PR. So,
Right.
and we're all on a crusade for that. But again, I do think that, Rubberhead Volume 2, Sex, Drugs, and Special Effects is a very important book for any artist of any medium to learn that experience. And, even the chef book sounds great as well. But I think it's important to continue to foster the arts in any form. And it may be that your experiences, what you teach or what people either learn through this book, may end up fostering something completely new that we haven't thought of. Maybe there's someone who...
I would absolutely hope so. I mean, any and all writers, there's only one reason we write, and that's to teach. I mean, it's the oldest art form. I mean, it's like cavemen coming back after the hunt and grunting and talking, telling a story and exaggerating about how they killed the antelope, and that's to teach. And that's what writing really is about. Even if you're reading the most disgusting Clive Barker novel ever, somewhere in there, Clive is teaching you, whether you know it or not. And that's really what this whole foray into writing for me has been about, is to teach. And I'm not talking about teaching how to make a mold. I'm talking about teaching, as corny as it sounds, life lessons, or how to be a better person, or whatever it may be.
Well, I think even if you're giving an experience to someone else, you may not know what the lesson is, but there may be something in that they relate to personally or individually.
Right. So hopefully the readers of this book will not become cocaine addicts and destroy their lives and business. Maybe that's what they'll take away from it.
Well, yeah, I hope not.
But it's a cautionary tale. I'm no longer a cocaine addict. I mean, those days are over. So I guess that's one thing to be learned. It's like, look at what this guy did and look what happened. I mean, I hope it doesn't, all the tales of drugs and sex, it doesn't actually glorify that, because my intent was to do the exact opposite.
Yeah, I know that sometimes it translates into, hey, well, this guy did some really crazy things, so if I do some really crazy things, I'll, achieve greatness as well. I personally, this show and what I do on my YouTube channel, I try and gear towards all ages. So yeah, kids out there, don't do drugs. Here's my little comment just on drugs, by the way. That I think that people who do too many drugs, it's not so much, there's always the risk that you could do some damage to yourself or even kill yourself. But even if that doesn't happen, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but sometimes I see people and they go, I really just wish I had that time back. I could have done something better with that time, something more fulfilling. But anyway.
Yeah.
That's
well, drugs are an interesting thing. I think the reason there are so many talented people become addicts is because in the beginning, with any substance, you think it's making you a better artist. You can take a look at H.R.Giger in his heyday. His work was unbelievable, and I guarantee you, I know the man really well. I've done 3 films with him. He was on heroin, and he would just focus to the minutia that made him a famous artist. But having known him over decades, over the years, that same thing that made him perhaps a better artist in the beginning destroyed him. By the time we did Species 2, the guy couldn't even hold a paintbrush in his hand. He was just doing crazy pen scribbles that didn't make sense. And I guarantee you that's what happens. The drugs they got the better of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I will also say that, that I think that I think a lot of people who do drugs maybe don't consider that they could possibly be that great artist without them as well. But anyway, we won't get off onto that tangent. I do want to...
It's a fascinating tangent. I mean, let me just finish with one more thing. Stephen King was a drug addict and an alcoholic during the beginning of his career. I mean, he doesn't even remember writing half of the books he wrote at the beginning. But at one point, his wife said, no, that's enough. That is absolutely enough. I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving. We're all leaving unless you straighten up. And he thought, wow, do I want my family or do I want my booze and drugs? And then he also said, well, I'm so used to, how can I write without these substances? Because that's the only way that's how I've been writing all my life. And he decided to stay with his family and give up the booze and drugs. And he picked up his pen and he found that he was the same writer after all. So there you go. That's the last I have to say about that.
And that's, it is a great story as well. I remember reading that story in his book, and he said,
Stephen King on writing, an amazing book. Any writer or anybody who wants to pick up the pen and start perfecting the craft of writing, I highly recommend that book. It's the thing that made me a good writer. I mean, obviously, if you can't write, you can't become a good writer if you're not a voracious reader. That's step one. But sometimes you need a little help. And that book I've read 3 or 4 times. It's amazing. I cannot recommend it enough.
It's funny. I've read it 3 or 4 times too, and I agree with you. It's an amazing book. There are a few points in there which I will not say out loud because I'll probably get attacked for it. But I can go, that's actually kind of bad writing advice. But, that's just my personal opinion. I think overall it is worth reading multiple times. And I just remember him saying after he was reading back some of the work he read or that he wrote when he was on drugs, he said to himself, gee, I really do regret not remember writing this because it reads like I had a really good time. So, there's some of that stuff you're not going to get back. But, that's for all the kids listening to this show, and you've had the experience of working with so many great people. H.R.Giger, Clive Barker, one of my favorites. I actually think Lord of Illusions is a very underrated movie. Also, Return of the Living Dead 3 was a real fun movie, and I love the design. Your main zombie design on that. I thought that was really original.
Well, that's Bryan Usna. He's a great friend, and I really love Bryan. And we worked very closely on the design for Mendy Clark's character. I forget what her name was in the film, but
Julie was her name.
Julie, right? But the thing about working with Bryan is that he makes me do better work. Because I trust him. It's like quite often somebody will come in and they'll say, "Make the ears bigger," and I'll just think, "Oh, you idiot." And then I make them bigger, and then they come back and they say make them smaller, and then we get this kind of standoffy relationship because neither one of us trust each other. Bryan and I trust each other, and so when he says something, I'm like, wow, you know what? That's actually a great idea. This will make it better. So I think that's why that character looks so cool, because we both trusted each other and had fun making it.
And that fun translates into the project. So anyway, well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add, particularly about the book? Because like I said, I'm expediting this episode because we need to make sure at the time of the recording of this, you have a $60,000 goal.
Correct.
And you are at $37,417. We need to. Those are rookie numbers. We need to get those numbers up. We need to get this book published.
They are. Last time we overfunded by almost 50%, and I'm sure we're going to break our goal this time. But it like I said, it's so nerve-wracking. And we all know that at the end of these Kickstarters, that's when you get like 30% of your funding, because people are waiting. They don't want to bet on the horse that's in the back. It's like watching a horse race. And go to Kickstarter, Rubberhead Volume 2. There's all kinds of cool stuff. There's a lot of art this time because Chet Zar, one of the greatest dark artists on our planet. I'm sure you know Chet's work.
Oh, he's amazing, and I'm hoping to have him on the show soon. He's a podcaster as well, so I'm...
Right, yeah, he is, and he does great stuff over at the Dark Art Society with Mike Correll, actually, and Mike is running my Kickstarter. He's a really cool man. As a matter of fact, I owe him a call this morning. But yeah, so there's a lot. It's not just pre-sales of the book this time. That's the horse, but there are other things too, because I'm working with Chet, so you can. Unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, his cover painting already sold sight unseen. Somebody bought it that's just a fan of mine in Chet and said, I don't care what it looks like, I'm going to buy it before I see it.
Oh, yeah.
So, but we're also selling prints of that, and of course there'll be pens and stickers and T-shirts, all with Chet's work on it. So it's kind of a great collaboration between myself, Chet Zar, and his team.
That's fantastic. And Chet is a wonderful guy. He's got great advice for aspiring artists on his podcast and his work.
That's true, and he also just recently opened a Patreon and talk about teaching. He does time lapses of his paintings and all kinds of unique stuff. Anybody out there that's interested in Chet's work should go over to his Patreon and take a look at it, because it's really one of the best ones out there.
Yeah, well, I think mine's going to be pretty good too. But no, you're absolutely right. And if you follow Chet on Instagram, you can see those time-lapse paintings, which is really worth it, because it's, you just think you can pick up a brush and do the same thing, and then you fall on your face. But you keep trying.
Oh, no, and oil painting, and Chet, is one of the last masters of oil painting. I mean, it's so hard. I know a lot of people that are great painters, but they use acrylics because it dries faster and it's easier, and you can rest your hand on the canvas. But if you watch Chet's tutorials and you watch his time lapses, you see how tough it really, really is. I mean, I don't know how he does it.
It's amazing to watch, but yeah, I think, again, important book, Rubberhead Volume 2, Sex, Drugs, and Special Effects. Get it. Don't wait. Don't think it's going to be around, like Steve has said. It's going to sell out. It's going to be hard to get, and you're going to regret it, because it is an important book, and we need to get not just Volume 2 out there, but 3, 4, and 5. Is it going to be 5 volumes?
There are, but I just came up. I had dinner with a couple of gentlemen that are fantastic. They're French documentary filmmakers, and they were in town to interview Steven Spielberg for their newest documentary on Phil Tippett, and they took me out to dinner because they're interested in potentially doing a documentary about me, which would be really, really cool. In the conversation, I had a really good idea, and they agreed with me, and I trust their opinion. That would be this: to blend Volume 3 and 4 together and make it a bigger volume. Because I mean, one of the reasons is that my nerves can't take these Kickstarters. So if we put Volume 3 and 4 together, and it does well, which I'm sure it will, we're actually going to put a pop-up book in it, because there's a gimmick in every book. This one, Volume 2, has a full 20-page graphic novel in it, starring me as a Superman-like cartoon character. It's really well done by Wes Huffer. The first book had a script formatted sequence, and so each book has a gimmick. This next one, Volume 3 and 4 put together, is going to have an actual pop-up book in it. So, and then if it does well, which I think it will, then I don't have to do another Kickstarter, because it's killing me. And if it does well, then obviously the final version will sell, because everybody will want the last one. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I agree, and I understand the Kickstarter thing. I've been a part of those. So, all right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. And to my audience's members, whether you're listening in the morning or the evening, please save Steve Johnson's nerves and help him out with this Kickstarter, and stick around for the following one, so we can keep him around and hearing his amazing stories. Thank you so much, Steve, for being a part of the show.
Can I say one more thing? Thank you, but can I say one more thing? I'm going live with the Stan Winston School tomorrow at noon to do another giveaway and a promotion for Rubberhead Volume 2, so all your fans should tune into that. That's noon tomorrow. Stan Winston School of Character Arts. It'll be a Facebook Live event on their page.
Oh, we're going to blast that out then. We're definitely going to
and we're giving tons of free shit away, glowing slimers, all kinds of fun stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Steve. Hoping I can get you to stick around for the post show, but if not, I know how busy you are. Yeah, to all audience members and Steve, have a great day and keep creating.
And you too.